Daniel Ricciardo had a pretty rough 2022, as not only did he consistently fail to match his teammates' performances, but he was also axed by the team. But now that he's joined Red Bull, the Australian has finally decided to open up about what the year was actually like and how it was Sebastian Vettel who came through for him. In today's video, we're going to talk about Ricciardo's 2022 struggles and more, so keep watching. First off, Vettel checked in on Ricciardo during 2022 struggles. Back in the day, Sebastian Vettel used to be this fierce competitor who didn't look back at the opponents eating his dust. These days, however, he's turned into this father figure for the whole grid as he guides them through the trials and tribulations of being a Formula One driver. And while Ricciardo's definitely not much younger than him, as he was actually Seb's teammate at Red Bull, the German legend knew exactly how to help his friend out. Now, Danny Ricks had a rough year, and it would be fair to say that at one point, he probably did hit rock bottom. Not to mention, losing your seat on the grid is never easy. Guess who came to the rescue for him? Of course, the now retired Seb. According to the Australian, Vettel's been a great friend to him throughout the year, even though they are technically rivals on the track. What's more, he even mentioned how the four-time world champion picked up the phone multiple times just to give him some reassurance and listen to what he had to say. And for him, that's exactly what a true friend is. Someone who actually cares about you and checks in on you when you're having a rough time. So kudos to good guy Seb, who's proven multiple times this year just how much of an incredible person he is. Like, not only is he actively advocating for worthy causes like social justice and climate change awareness, but he's also been a mentor to so many people, including Ricciardo, Charles Leclerc, and of course, Mick Schumacher. Up next, Ricciardo has a deeper level of friendship with Seb. Obviously, it's not unusual for drivers to check up on each other, especially since most of them have been around the paddock together for years at this point. What's more, some drivers just tend to be more extroverted than others and really like engaging with their rivals. But according to Ricciardo, there's something different about his relationship with Vettel. Speaking to SpeedCafe.com, the Aussie drivers talked about how everyone gets on with each other on the grid. So you also tend to build friendships. For instance, Lando and Daniel have been a great pairing over the past 2 years, and their banter's unmatched as well. The four-time world champion, however, has a deeper level of friendship with the Honey Badger. The 33-year-old then went into a bit more detail and said that some gestures that the German made and some of the kindness he showed during those hard times was unexpected, to say the least. But of course, he admitted it was super nice. Again, we're not surprised, because that's just the guy Seb has turned into over the past few years. In fact, these days, he's even decided to mend broken relationships from the past. His rivalry with Mark Webber, for example, was one of the fieriest ones on the grid back in the day. These days, however, the former Red Bull duo is on pretty good terms. Likewise, the 35-year-old has also grown closer to Lewis Hamilton after years of intense battles. And honestly, it's a shame that we're not going to have him on the grid next year, because F1 does need more drivers like him. What's more, other drivers also reached out to Ricciardo. Now, Ricciardo's already troubled season went from bad to worse when he received confirmation that McLaren would be replacing him with Oscar Piastri. And according to the Australian, that's when he had the most support from everyone, including Seb. He talked about how there was a lot of noise around him, both in the media and just personally, with all the contract stuff. Not to mention, he didn't feel great about himself mentally either. So it was actually super clutch of the German to come through for him at that time. That said, the Aussie did add that he doesn't want to single Vettel out, because other drivers reached out and helped him with stuff as well. Also, while he didn't really name these people, we figure he was probably talking about people like Norris. Then again, the Honey Badger admitted that out of everyone, Sebastian was still the guy who was picking up the phone and checking in the most. He also said that on a personal level, the four-time champ's done a lot for him, so he's very appreciative of that. Not to mention, Seb is just an all-around great guy. Obviously, while Vettel was super helpful for Ricciardo, we're sure he would have done the same if it were some other driver on the grid as well. After all, as we've mentioned earlier, he's just that type of guy. Danny Rick also echoed these sentiments during his interview, saying that he's just a very caring individual, because not only does he care about the sport as a whole, but he also cares a lot about all the drivers on the grid. The 33-year-old then went on to explain that while it's true that everyone's got that competitive spirit inside them, including Seb, he's just able to separate that when he's not in the cockpit. And maybe that sort of empathy comes from experience or something else entirely. But the fact of the matter is that he's just able to look out for his fellow drivers more than anyone else. Coming up, Vettel is still just as fierce as anyone on track. Now, of course, just because Seb's a nice guy and cares about other drivers on the grid doesn't mean he'd actually let you overtake without a challenge. In fact, he's the opposite, as he's one of the most competitive drivers on the grid. Not to mention that back in his Red Bull days, he was perhaps even more aggressive than Max Verstappen. So when Ricciardo talked about the German as a competitor, he had nothing but respect for him. He said that when he thinks back to 2013, he thinks about Vettel's relentless approach as he went on to win every single race in the second half of the season. Oh, and winning wasn't enough for him. The four-time champion wanted to destroy the competition on his way to the title. That's the type of driver he was. What's more, according to Daniel, you could just see the raw competitor in him. You know, that drive to not only win, but to obliterate the opposition. So you've got to admire and respect that side of him as well. And honestly, we'd have to agree, while Seb wasn't quite the same driver after his spell with the Scuderia, he was arguably one of, if not the most dominant drivers in the sport, back during his 4-championship streak with Red Bull. And that, in and of itself, makes him one of the greatest drivers ever in Formula One history. Let's just hope he continues to stick around the paddock after his retirement and act as a mentor to younger drivers coming through the ranks. Now for some more insight from Ricciardo about his future. Alright, so there's been a lot of speculation about the Honey Badger's move to Red Bull, cause a lot of people think he could have gone to a backmarker team and retained his place on the grid. On top of that, many experts like, say, Jenson Button, also believe that a year is a very long time in Formula One, and people can forget about you pretty quickly. But for Ricciardo, there was no chance of him ever going to one of the teams with an empty seat, cause, well, it would have been a bad move for his career. Now, of course, that doesn't mean being Red Bull's third driver is gonna magically kickstart his career again, and someone like Mercedes is gonna hire him. After all, he's probably not even gonna get a race with the energy drinks outfit, and the best he could hope for is a practice session or two. Still, he thinks this was the right move for a couple of reasons. One, it's familiar territory, and he knows everyone working on the team. And secondly, this will allow him to be introspective about his own driving and mental flaws just so he could come back stronger in 2024. Speaking to Crash.net, he admitted that there were risks attached to both joining Red Bull or a backmarker team. Still, he explained that if he truly were to be back on the grid in 2024, he'd come out as a better version of himself with this move. Finally, no performance guarantees from Ricciardo. We get it. Ricciardo wants to reevaluate his place on the grid right now and take some time off to come back stronger. You've got to wonder though, what would have happened if he did join someone like Williams or AlphaTauri? Sure, we get that he wasn't performing well for McLaren, but would that have been true for all the other teams too? Well, the Honey Badger definitely does seem to think so, cause for him, the risk attached to jumping into a seat for 2023 and not being able to perform is just too big. He went on to explain how he weighed up accepting a position further down the grid, but ultimately decided against it as nothing is guaranteed in terms of performance, and he needs to figure out where his pace is at. What's more, according to the 33-year-old, if the 2023 season with some backmarker team turned out to be unsuccessful, then he probably would have been done with the sport. So of course, that sort of risk is just way bigger than what he's signed up for now. To be fair, we'd have to agree as well, cause with Red Bull, at least he's got one of the fastest cars on the grid under him, and even if he can match someone like Sergio Perez during a practice session, or just show everyone that he hasn't lost his mojo just yet, that instantly improves his chances of getting into a competitive car in 2024. What do you think though? Did Ricciardo make the right call by moving to Red Bull? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.